Welcome, everyone. My name is Kathy Stevens. I'm the executive director at MCAEL. I think this is probably my 11th or 12th grants information session, and yet I don't know it all because things evolve and we want to make sure we keep having an innovative grants process that meets the needs of the county, that meets the needs of our grant partners, and most importantly, of course, the learners. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to just give a quick overview here. Several of the McHale colleagues are on as well. I know that Grace Karambiri is here, Tom Colling, Emma Moon, not Emma Munoz, oh my gosh, Emma Starr, and Danny Keeley. So you'll have a chance to see and talk with them at some point. But I want to welcome all of you, or some of you are returning grant partners, and some of you may be new grant partners. So welcome. McHale does many things. One of the things that is one of our biggest processes each year is the grant making process. And this is the start of that for this year. Um, as many of you know, the county provides McHale with funding that then we pass through as community grants to nonprofits in the county. Part of what our process depends on is how much money the county does provide to us. That is dependent on the county budget. Right now, the budget is being worked on by the executive branch, and the executive branch will release that budget on March 15th. And then the county council will have time with it to look at any changes, things that they want to highlight, not highlight, move things around before the budget is finalized at the end of May. So our process runs a little bit simultaneous with that. Grace is going to go through the timeline and our grant application process. But we always do need to let our grant partners know that the amount of grant funding we have depends on how the county has allocated money to us and what other things we need to do that we see globally in terms of both the sustainability of programs and our wide network of resources, but also places where we have looked at data, where we have talked with other grant recipients, and we know that we have need in the county. And we're going to get to that a little bit as well. Overall, we want to make sure that we're continuing to support the existing network and grow the network so that we're serving people who are not currently as well served. And we're going to talk to you about the data in a little bit. And we're not serving everyone who can be served. And that always is a goal to increase those numbers. Um, for anyone who is a returning grant partner on the call, I just want to thank you for your continued work and acknowledge that you're in the middle of a successful year, and last year was successful as well. Um, it is interesting. We were looking a little bit at the data, and about 49% of our classes are currently online, 43% are in person, and then there's the difference, which is those who are doing some sort of hybrid option. And we all know this is a challenge. Online classes work well for some people, not as well for other people. And I'm including learners and instructors in those people. So we want to make sure we continue to have a balance and continue to reap the benefits from both types of instruction. I mean, nothing beats the community that's created when you have people in person. At the same time, many people can't access classes unless they can do it remotely from their own home. As in the past, we're serving mostly Spanish speakers. It's about 72% of the learners that you all provide the data to us. And then in descending order after that, we're serving Chinese speakers, French speakers, Amharic speakers, and Portuguese speakers. This data is not all final yet. We're still working with the mid-year reports, but I do just want to note that for you. And we know that we've had some new reporting forms. Thank you for using those, and appreciate the learning curve that some of that creates for you. And we're looking also at the theme that many of you mentioned, and we know has been going on, that we don't have enough instructors, and we're looking for more trained instructors to be able to recruit them. And then how do we retain good instructors? How do you all retain the instructors that you have? And making sure that we have the partnerships in the county, perhaps with Montgomery College's TESOL certification program and others to continue to do that. So A few general words of welcome, but again, this is an important process. And maybe, Grace, should we go to the slides and I will just talk about what we're going to do today before I turn it over to you. So we will obviously go to the next slide then. So today, talking about kind of the overview, where is MCAEL? Our strategic plan is on our website, and there's lots of information there that you can see where we're going, where our focus is on equity, where our focus is on teacher recruitment and retention, and all those things. We're also going to go over the data so that you understand the context in which we're running our grants program this year. And then Grace is going to walk us through the nitty gritty, as I call it. What is the timeline for the grants program this year? What you should pay attention to in terms of dates, how you fill out the application, what are the highlights on the application, um, how does our grant panel review the applications, what they're going to be looking for. And then for you all, we run our grants process through a portal. And so how do you access it? How do you start an application? That kind of thing. And so I'm going to just stop there to see if there are any quick questions. That's the outline of what we're going to do over the next hour or so together. And if there are any questions, we can do that. If not, I will turn it to Grace.
Oh, thank you so much, Kathy, for that. Let me just remove the spotlight really quickly so people can see me. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the adult ESOL needs that are within Montgomery County. We have over 139,000 adults in Montgomery County who report that they speak English less than very well. We take that from the American Community Survey, and we also have an interactive map for 2022 and 2023 that is on our website. You will be getting this PowerPoint in a follow-up email, but this interactive map gives you an overview of really what the needs are here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And then a lot of that is pulled from the MAP census data, and this talks about where the adults live in the county, and then it's overlaid on top of learner data to see the percentage of those that are taking classes within each zip code. So right here, you'll see that this is a slide, a map of the adult needs. The darkest purple areas show the highest concentrations of census respondents who say that they speak English less than very well. So the darker purple areas are really some big focus areas for MCAEL as well as just ESOL programs in general that you might want to really consider while you're doing your applications. This is the learners served by language group. This shows the breakdown of learners from 2019 to 2023. So you'll see, like we mentioned before, that Spanish is the top language that learners speak, and you'll see that it's in some cases has gone up for some categories, in some cases has gone down. Again, this information is on the data link that I talked about before. And here you will see that this shows the learners that are served by region, and this is also since 2019. You'll notice that the most underrepresented region is in East County, and the percentage hasn't changed very much since 2019, while other areas like Up County have gone up little by little. Here are the learners that are this is a breakdown of the learners by level and delivery method. You will notice that the online classes still make up a pretty big chunk of the classes, how they're delivered, but that in the beginning and the low beginning classes, those numbers tend to drop off as there are more in-person classes. And that matches up with the idea that usually lower level English learners need in-person classes.
晶晶呢？等他呗，他每次最慢。
Sorry. Danny, I'm gonna ask you if you could be on mute duty as well, please. Okay. And so if you could put the link for the story map in the chat, that would be great. And I'm gonna hand it over to you, Kathy.
Sure, yeah, and I think I did see the story map link there already, but so people know that is a great tool for you to use while you're working on your grant applications. So just a little background and overview for those of you who might be a little bit newer to our grants program. McHale has had responsibility for the adult ESOL grants for the county since 2007. Just I don't have the beginning number, but we only granted out about $500,000 back in those days, maybe even less. This year that we're in, $1.4 million has been granted out to 21 organizations for 27 programs. All of that is listed on our website, so you can see who's getting what grants for what purposes. And as I mentioned, we always want to increase the numbers of classes and learners served, as well as maintain quality instruction that lead to learner gains. But we also want to, these go hand in hand and are a little bit conflicting at times. We want to provide different types of learning opportunities for different types of learners. So are there learners in geographic locations that can't easily get to classes? Are there need for conversation classes? As Grace just mentioned, for lower level learners, being in person often is better for their learning gains because then they're not navigating technology, et cetera, while they're also trying to learn English. So we're trying to make sure that we have a breadth of opportunities. And that means a breadth and a diversity of programs and organizations across the county that provide classes. We've been doing a lot of work with our community learning groups to broaden those pipelines and broaden those entry points. But we continue to also want to reduce the barriers to learning. So you'll see that in the grants, we do provide some funding for childcare that happens during class time so that people don't have to have a access if they need it for children to be cared for while they're learning, and some other things to make sure that they can access classes. One of the biggest barriers continues to be kind of time in the day, and we also look to have classes at different times of the day, different days of the week. There's always demand for weekend classes, so these are things to consider as well. Um, and we'll be talking a little bit about the review process, but Grace is going to now jump us into, I believe, the timeline for this year. And we're right at the beginning here in February, and the whole thing will take us through June. So here we go.
So this is the timeline for the grant cycle timeline for this year. You will also find this on the grants website, but this is on February 12th. On February 12th, the grant guidelines were released. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the grants, www.mcael.org/grants, you will see the grant guidelines, and there are different tabs. So for program, and access and small grants are all in the different tab that you need to click on in order to see the guidelines as well as the budget workbook, which we will talk about a little bit more later. Right now, we're in the middle of the grants information session. And an important thing to note is that on February 23rd, the grants portal is going to open up. And that is this Friday. And then on the March 19th, 20th, and the 21st, there's an opportunity to come to a Q&A with McHale staff. And this is for first-time applicants or new program staff. And the sign-up is available on the website, or on McHale's website, as well as I put the link to the end of this PowerPoint, the PowerPoint slides, but please make sure that you're signing up for, we're doing it through Sign Up Genius. So you need to sign up through Sign Up Genius, but also need to register through Zoom in order to be good for the Q&A.
So those are virtual Q&A sessions, right, Grace?
Yeah.
So this means at the airport?
Sorry, if you could make sure that you are muting yourself, please. Thank you. Okay, and April 9th is the application due date. And then on Wednesdays, May 15th and on Friday, May 17th, we will have the online interviews with the MCAEL Grant Review Panel, which I'll talk about a little bit more, and then the awards are going to be announced in June. So I'm going to get into talking a bit more about the guidelines and the application forms themselves. So as most of you know, there are 3 grant types. Program grants, which the amount is $20,000 up above $20,000. The access grants are above $7,500 to $20,000. And then the access small grants are anything 7,500 and below. And you'll see that there are different eligibility criteria. Well, the most notable one being that the access small grants are for nonprofit groups that are incorporated into the state of Maryland, but they do not necessarily need to have a 501c3 tax exempt status.
Grace, while you're changing slides, if people do have questions while we're on a particular part here, I think if you raised your hand through Zoom, we could see you. We just don't have access to see you right now, so you might have to jump in or raise your hand. You could put it in the chat too.
Thank you, Kathy. And so going and delving into each grant a little bit more. The program grants are really here to maintain and expand the established programs, and they're offering 120 hours for organizations that offer 120 hours of instructional time, and organizations that apply for these must have an established infrastructure, because this is a pretty big grant, and oftentimes there are lots of classes involved in this. They must be able to show a solid track record of demonstrating the ability to be successful and to successfully carry out a program, and they have to have managed enrollment classes. So that means these classes are like sequential, and their registration dates, and there's a start date and an end date, and it's not drop-ins. And again, like I mentioned before, it's $20,000 and up, and these funds can be used for support services like childcare and transportation, as well as program management, to strengthen the program management and to help deliver the services, as well as some indirect costs. And the next grant that I want to talk about is the Access Grant. So as with last year, in addition to the instructor pay, instructor materials and books, and coordination times, Access Grants Fund can be used for childcare, transportation, and support. And these Access Grants are designed to create access for those that are not quite ready to have those formal English classes. And these are drop-in classes, and oftentimes the adult learners can join at any time during the semester, and they are for classes that have less than 120 hours per learner. And I talked a little bit already about the things that the funds can be used for. Something that I didn't mention was the Zoom licenses, as well as I don't think I mentioned the rent as well. So that is the Access Grant. And then the last grant, which is our most new grant, is the Access Small Grant. And these were established as a subcategory to the Access Grants, and they encourage community and faith-based organizations to offer adult English classes. And this again is the one that 501c3 tax exempt status is not required. And another important thing to note is that FY24 or previous year recipients of the grants are the ones who are eligible to, or startup grants are eligible for this. The applicants for program or access grants for this year are not eligible to apply for this grant. Okay. And again, these are similar to what the funds that you can use for the other grants. And again, this is for requests up to $7,500. Okay, and the funds can be used for all this is across grant types. Funds cannot be used for refreshments or food or gift cards for volunteers, instructors, or learners. And MCAEL grant partners must also ensure that their programs and curriculum content support content supported with MCAEL funding does not contain language or visuals that advocate for or encourage learners to participate in any religious or political activities, and that the learner environments in their classes are inclusive and welcoming to participants of all backgrounds and experiences. Okay, I'm gonna pass it on to Kathy.
And before I go into this, there was just a question in the chat about a group that is based in Prince George's County. As you are welcome to apply as long as you make sure your grant is very specific about who you'll be serving in Montgomery County, your classes or learners here. So again, priorities. There's certain things that we look for each year. This is not to mean that this is exclusive of other things, but we do prioritize classes or drop-in learning opportunities in areas where we know there are fewer programs. You saw on one of the previous slides that East County continues to be underserved. So we always look for those areas. Some of the zip codes that we know are underserved, there are fewer adult ESOL learners accessing classes are in the following zip codes that are listed here. Again, you'll get a copy of the PowerPoint, so you don't need to worry about taking these down. But also, this is where you should use our story map and the MCAEL equity focus areas, because that will really tell you where the focus areas based on data that we've gotten from the county and our own data show. So this is why these tools are available to you. And we also know that classes do best where the density of potential learners is high. We also know that we want to prioritize any communities, whether that's a geographical community or an ethnic community or a group of recently arrived immigrants, neighbors that they don't have their dedicated English classes. And as I mentioned before, weekend classes are always something we want to take a look at and place a little bit higher on our priority list. So I think that's all. So it's the next slide. I'm sorry, Grace, is the next slide mine too, or is that it?
I think it's me next. There was another question in the chat as well.
Oh, great.
Kathy, you might want to cover. So it's just about whether we can fund classes that are used to prepare people for taking citizenship exams.
We have done some funding in that area. You need to make sure that the ESOL is part of that as well. Something to get a little bit more, you want to make sure that English is kind of the priority, something that should take a closer look at our grant guidelines about as well. And so Tom,
Okay.
your
Yes.
turn.
Thank you. That was seamless. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Colling. I'm MCAEL's Manager of Administration and Grants. So good to be with you again this afternoon. The first thing to note on the applications is that there are actually two different parts to it. So the first is the narrative application. So that requires a few longer form responses along with some basic organizational information, while the application data summary is more focused on quantitative questions about the program you're aiming to deliver. The latter, the data summary, also asks you to complete a workbook in Excel, which is like a separate attachment you can upload. Anyone applying for an Access Small Grant, it's a slightly different process, and there's a fillable PDF available to you as well. Next slide. So the first thing to mention is that everything is available right now on our grants website. So I think Grace provided the link to that already, mcael.org/grants. If you look under the ready to apply section, you should be able to find the narrative questions and the templates for the data and budget workbooks as well. So on those data and budget workbooks, you can see on the slide listed a few different data that we request via these forms. The comparison with prior years shouldn't be too much of a heavy lift, assuming that you've applied previously. And if you haven't, obviously, it's not as relevant. For the Access Small Grants, there's a slightly different form, just with a little less information. Next slide. So on the data and budget forms, as I mentioned, it's an Excel attachment, so it's something you have to upload in addition to filling out the online form. One piece of advice we have is that it's probably sensible to complete the Excel file first rather than doing the online form, just because it's easier to make changes that way round, and you're not having to do any duplication of changes if you're filling them both out together. On this Excel workbook, there are a couple of tabs at the start that include instructions and preempt some questions you might otherwise have. If you have a question that's not covered there and you want to get in touch with us, I would probably say contact me in the first instance, and I can always relay that if it's a question that's intended for someone else. On the program expenses, if you have information from previous years, as most applicants probably do, we ask you to include that partly so we can just try and assess how needs are changing, how your program's changing over time. So alluding a little to what Kathy was talking about at the top there, how we're trying to, as a coalition, look at the changing needs in the county as a whole. On the penultimate bullet point here on cost bases, just make those as understandable as you can and as ubiquitous as you can. The main reason, or one of the main reasons why there's kind of back and forth on budgets and invoices, is that a cost basis might be unclear or just might not be there. So if you're talking about textbooks, for example, instead of just saying textbooks for this amount, say like there are 40 textbooks at $50 each, so the total is 2,000. So just breaking the total down into its constituent parts where possible. The other common reason for back and forth on budgets and invoices is mathematical errors. So a double check of the numbers before submitting, or using formulas in Excel is a useful way to get around those sorts of issues. There are already some pre-populated formulas in the workbooks. So again, just check that you actually have to fill in the space you're trying to fill in, because things like percentages, sums and totals and things like that, they're often filled in beforehand just to save you having to do that. So the next few slides show the tabs of the workbook. So you can see here, pretty self-explanatory. There's space to add information about classes, attendees, instruction, things like that. And the next tab is just a space for you to provide information about the classes you're aiming to deliver, which again, pretty self-explanatory. Next, this is the program expenses tab of the workbook. So you can see we've included at the top in red there of each section some what we think are good examples of cost bases. So you can see they're complete, the maths works out, and all of that good stuff. If we look at the next tab on the revenue side, so just a few notes here. This only applies to the revenue that you're going to use for this program. So it's not your organizational revenue. You don't have to include every piece of revenue that comes to the organization, just the revenue that pertains to the program in question. Total revenue here should match at least roughly the expenses on the previous tab. So you want those two to be in balance as much as you can. One last note on in-kind revenue and expenses. So there are sections on both expense and revenue tabs for in-kind. Just make sure that they offset. So if you include it as an expense, include it as a revenue. If you include it as a revenue, include it as an expense. So those two should always balance out, should always zero out. So there's no real impact on your budget. I think that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, do get in touch. tcolling@mcael.org. I'll put that in the chat as well. And unless there are any questions, Grace, I'll hand it back.
Let's, yeah.
There's one question I see in the chat.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. Grace, do you want to go over that? The question has to do with if we are an Access Small Grant in FY24, can we be an Access Small Grant in FY25, or do we need to go up to an Access Grant?
No, you can definitely continue to apply for a small an Access Small Grant in 2024. It's just that if you are applying for, or in 2025, if you're applying for an Access Small Grant in FY 2025, it means that you're not applying for a program or access grant.
Right, and program and access grants can't apply for access small grants. That's kind of the point to make. If you're already kind of up there on the scale, you can't apply for the smaller ones. I just want to pause. Tom gave a great overview. That was a lot of information. Are there any questions just looking at the workbooks and things like that? Again, you might just have to speak up. I don't know that we can see raised hands at the moment. I'll give you a chance to unmute if that's the case. I guess we're good. If you're getting your thoughts together and you need to put it in the chat, we can totally come back to you. And of course, take the time to look at these things ahead of time and schedule for one of the Q&A sessions on Zoom. If you are a first-time grant partner, you'll want to take a little bit of a look at these kinds of things. All right, Grace, back to you.
Thank you. I just want to talk a little bit about the grant review panel. Oh, sorry, I saw a question. Should we consider ourselves returning applicants if we did not apply in 2024? You can consider yourself a returning applicant if you have applied ever.
Yep.
So I talked a little bit about the interviews that are going to take place on I think the 15th and the 17th of May. These interviews are done by grant review panelists, and this is a community review panel that is representative of the county, and they have expertise on adult ESOL education, nonprofit, and they are nonprofit and business professionals included, grant making and grant reviewers, as well as people that are from a specific population and know their needs or work closely with those populations, and they're from all regions in the county. MCAEL staff members support the applicants through the process and coordinate with the MCAEL grant panel to facilitate the grants process, but we do not make the funding decisions or participate in the funding allocation process. The panelists will review application and interview the applicants, which are yourselves, and they will consider a clear indication of lessons learned this year. These are all things that are going to be in your application. Incorporation and what you're incorporating into the next year's plan based off of the lessons that you learned from this year. Thoughtfulness of approach to in-person and versus online classes, or if you do hybrid, those are different methods of teaching. Evidence of flexibility in meeting the needs of the learners, or they'll look at past performance if you're a past grant, making sure that grant requirements are met. Some of those grant requirements include the number of meetings attended and the submission of reports. A complete application that includes the budget, all the budget information that Tom talks about, and then alignment with MCAEL's evolving work around access and equity. If you have any questions, you can email program@mcael.org. And again, for the first-time applicants, you can make the appointments online. I'm going to stop before I go on to our last portion to see if there are any questions that I can answer. Okay, I'm going to continue. So the MCAEL online grants portal will be available at mcael.org/grants. It'll be a link at the bottom of the page. And again, the applications will be available this Friday on February 23rd. If you are a first-time grant applicant, you need to create an account, and you create one account per organization. So if you're applying for multiple different types of grants, you don't need to apply for a bunch of different accounts. And we do ours through Wise. We do our grant applications and our grant portals through Wise Hive /Zengen. And so you need to sign up with your email password, do the normal signing up for accounts. And then you need to create a profile, and that profile will include your organization name, your website if you have one, program contact. So that is really important to make sure that you fill this out accurately. And this is talking a little bit more about the organization profile. Like I said, name, address, legal name. And then you'll see once you've completed something that you'll see a complete and a check mark. So that's a really good way to know that you've done everything, but you can always go back and edit it if something changes. And then you can get started on a grant application. And you would click the get started, and you will have the different options that you can submit. And then make sure to note that when you're submitting, the submission status orange means that there's progress less action that needs to be taken in order to complete it, and purple means that everything is submitted for your grant application. So when you click on get started, you'll see that there are 2 required forms, and that is the grant application form and the application data summary. And you need to, you can view those and you can edit them. And I think those are pretty self-explanatory. And then make sure the grant portal might look a little bit different from here, just because we're making changes. But something that's really important to note is to choose the correct application form. So if you're applying for a program grant, make sure that you're hitting program grant, or else the questions are different and the criteria is different. So make sure that you're choosing the correct form. And as Tom talked about, there are a supplemental documentation that you need to upload. So it just works like any other upload. You upload the organization's statement of financial activities, and then the financial statement, as well as board of directors, and then as well as there's the budget workbook. Oops, sorry. And so this is talking about the data summary. That this may or may not change, but this is you're copying directly from your data workbook, your targets. So make sure that you're matching what you're putting in your data workbook into what you put here as well. And before I move to the last slide, do you have any questions about this application form / please note that if you are doing the application and you're running into some issues, you can always send me an email, or send the programs at MCAEL an email, or you can send Rudy an email as well. Any questions?
Grace, maybe do you have one more slide? Maybe we'll stop sharing after the last slide and then open up for some additional discussion if there is any.
This is just the last slide. It's just a reminder to register for the Q&A session. Again, if you're new staff or you're a first-time applicant, and then a reminder that the portal will open up on Friday, on this Friday. So that's it.
That's great. So maybe we'll do a stop share and just on reflection now, whether people have any questions they want to ask or think. For many of you, you've done this application before. There is a lot that we just went over very quickly. So if you're new to this, if you've never written a grant before, we'll take a little bit of time to look at. We try to balance our need for information to make sure that the grant panel has everything they need to make good decisions, balance that need with balancing for you all to make sure that it's not too onerous. And I know that anytime I fill out a grant application, I'm like, why do they need all this? It is important. So we appreciate the time and the effort that this does take.
And please remember that in my follow-up email, you will also you'll get the PowerPoint, but as well as a link to this recording. So you can always go back to this and use it to troubleshoot any questions you might have.
I just
And
want to highlight one point. I'm sorry, Grace.
no, go ahead.
It is really important when you're working on your data workbook to go ahead, Melissa, we'll get to you, to go ahead and do that first in the Excel spreadsheet. We want those numbers to match. They don't always match. So be careful, check your math, check your numbers, all of that. And that Excel spreadsheet is done very intentionally with cells that are locked. Don't edit anything, don't mess with it. It's the kind of thing that we want to make your life easy, and we want you to make our lives easy, and for the grant panel too. So Melissa, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. I have two quick questions. One is just the differentiating factor between access and access small. Was it because the descriptions in one of the places was very, very similar, with the exception of the necessity to be nonprofit, whatever. So could you just kind of define that just a little bit more clearly, just so I know which one to consider?
Sure. So for the access small grants, the biggest, like you said, the biggest difference is the threshold. So like for access small, it's 7,500 and below, and then for access is 7,500. The reporting is also different between the two. So access small grants have a little bit less things to report. I would say it is a good jump from a startup grant to access small grant. I think that's a good level, but also there is a technical assistance piece that is attached to the access small grants as well, since these are often beginner programs.
Okay, and then my second question is, it's notified in mid-June. Are we including like summer sessions in this grant, as far as budget wise, or will the money arrive in time for fall? Like, what's the timeline of what sessions it will fund?
A good question. Grace, do you want me to do that one?
Sure.
So the funding is for the fiscal year 25, which begins on July 1st. We will not have access to the funding, though. We will try to get to you as soon as possible. It would not be before the end of August, more likely in September, that because we need you all to sign your letters of agreement during the month of July, during June, July, and then we have to get the information to the county. They get us the money, then we get money to you. So that's, yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to mention is if you want more information really on what the difference is, you can look, if you go onto the website, mcael.com/grants, you'll see the guidelines, and those guidelines are really specific on what you can just pull all of them up, and you'll see across the grants what the difference is between each one. Any other questions?
Or any comments or words of wisdom from those of you who've done this many years?
Is
Oh, there's
Rudy
no one.
still? Is Rudy still with MCAEL?
Yeah, she just couldn't be here today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, we wish you all success and hope that you can participate. Like we said, this is one of many things that MCAEL does, and it's important. And we always want to advocate. We're the main advocacy organization for the county for adult ESOL. So we advocate so that we can get funding for you all, and hope that you can leverage other sources of funding as well. But certainly this is a major source. So if there are no other questions or comments, I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time today to participate in this. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.